Strong a day, be your best every day. Hi, I'm Adimus, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. I aim to help you stay healthy, be happier, and deal with challenges with greater resilience. Do you know what is trauma-informed positive education? How can teachers and educators help trauma-affected students increase their psychological capacities and resources? Today, you will meet Dr. Tom Brunzell. Tom will show you how educators can help trauma-affected students to increase their psychological capacities and resources using trauma-informed positive education model. Tom will also share with you his latest book called Creating Trauma-Informed Strengths-Based Classroom. Thank you. Hi, I'm Adimus, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. Thank you for watching Strength Optimizer, the Science Up Your Wellbeing series. Today, we have Dr. Tom Brunzell joining us. Tom has experience as a teacher, school leader, researcher, and education advisor. He is the director of education at Barry Street, an honorary fellow at the University of Melbourne Graduate School of Education. Tom presents internationally on topics of transforming school culture, student engagement, trauma-aware practice, well-being and positive psychology, and effective school leadership. I'm so grateful to have you today. Tom, how are you doing?
Hello, Adimus. Nice to see you and happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you once again for taking the time to share trauma-informed positive education, especially how educators can help trauma-affected students to increase their psychology capacities and resources. So, Tom, I'm just curious and wondering, like, what brought you to the field of trauma-informed positive education? I mean, what are your aspirations and beliefs?
Great questions. So I'd like to begin by just telling my very, very quick story to our listeners and watchers today.
Yeah.
So if you guess my accent correctly, I was raised in Los Angeles, but spent most of my time as a teacher and leader in New York City,
Okay.
where I worked in schools in the Bronx and then in Harlem. And oh gosh, over a decade ago, my school in New York City began working with Marty Seligman and Angela Duckworth
Yeah.
way before the words positive and education were a thing.
Aha.
And so I had the privilege of really working with the team at the University of Pennsylvania in early days to explore how we could integrate the research specifically from Seligman and Duckworth into the floorboards of our own school. And so I've had real deep roots in the well-being sciences as a personal journey toward healing and growth for my own students.
Okay.
And then about a decade ago, some Australians came to visit and see what we were doing. And one thing has led to another, and I landed in Melbourne.
Wow.
Which was a real twist of journey. I had no intention of ever leaving the United States, but when I met the good folks at Barry Street, Victoria, and we are one of Australia's largest child and family welfare and education providers, I realized that the groups at Barry Street were really bolstering their own understanding of this science called trauma-informed practice, and understanding trauma-informed practices both in therapeutics and social care and in education. And so what I realized, having come right from New York and all of my friends at the University of Pennsylvania, and then landing here, I realized that the silos were pretty strong between the trauma-informed practice people and the well-being and positive psychology and positive education people. And thus I realized, wait a second, my own educational journey as a professional and soon to be researcher was, you talk about values. I realized my values at that moment were about integration, because I didn't want educators who were helping struggling kids feel overwhelmed or feel like they couldn't do trauma-informed practice or positive education. And we had to roll up our sleeves and create new ways of working that integrated the two fields.
Excellent. So basically you saw a gap and the value of integrating the two practices. and that's how you started your research journey, and then going on to finish your PhD, and then right now working as a director at the Barry Street Educations.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I do see the point, especially sometimes when people or educators look at the word trauma-informed practice, some of the I guess the generalizations could be, oh, this is in the field of the clinicians, so whether it's a counselor, or
Great question.
psychologist, social
Yep.
workers, whereas we are the teachers, educators, we're focusing on the learning needs. But yet, at the same time, based on experiences, and also know that there are many, unfortunately, kids who have been affected by trauma, which means that not only we need to address their learning needs, but also the holistic needs of the well-being or the psychological capacity. So I'm really interested and keen to find out more about your research and also your practices as well.
Well, I love the idea that the two of us, Ademus, have very different professional training backgrounds, and we kind of represent the various people who get to help and support schools and people out there. I love the provocation. I would suggest that you, with a psychology background and a therapeutic background, you absolutely are a trauma-informed professional, as we have been getting to know each other. I do not have a clinical psychology background. I'm an educator. I'm a teacher trained. I'm school leadership trained and an education researcher. So there are very clear lines for me and in my field around what trauma-informed practice means as opposed to what it means in therapeutic and clinical work. I would humbly suggest that, when you're working therapeutically one-on-one with somebody, that has a whole entire set of professional domains of practice that you're well aware of. For me as a teacher person, I would suggest that as teachers, we are not in the province of working through therapeutic and psychological struggle in the way you do. We are there for learning. And so when I support young people, and when I say young people, we work with a variety of young people. I mean, young people who are high flyers, who definitely need strategies to bolster their own journey toward higher education and beyond. We also work with very vulnerable students with very complex unmet needs as a result of adversity and trauma impacts. So as a teacher, trauma-informed practice for us means really sort of the broad umbrellas of building self-regulation in the service of learning and helping a young person understand in classrooms and in learning settings how to build their ability to self-regulate when they feel uncertain or they feel heightened. And we know many of the kids we work with have a heightened baseline for stress tolerance because of their long journey of childhood adversity and protective mechanisms to take care of themselves. And also trauma and adversity impacts a young person's ability to relate strongly in classrooms with their peers, with teachers, and develop strong relationships for collaboration and creativity. So as a teacher, I need to be aware that stress impacts my ability to self-regulate and form strong relationships for learning with others. And those are the two ports of call that I want trauma-informed educators to consider as they're supporting students.
Excellent. So when you talk about these two elements of regulations as a relationship in the trauma-informed educations, I'm also aware that you have brought in a new model, correct me if I'm not using the right lingo, or a new model, or a new concept of trauma-informed positive education. So again, I'm curious to find out, how is it different from the existing trauma-informed education?
Great question. So I don't want to presume knowledge of our listeners and our audience today, so I'll go pretty quickly. And of course, we have resources I know that you're offering people. But when we say positive education, I would quickly just describe that as the evidence-informed and evidence-based practices arising from well-being sciences that really have shown practical strategies for students. Often those topics include things like resilience, self-talk, and mindfulness, and understanding, identifying, and using your character strengths, and all the good stuff around POS Ed. What we found is that teachers who teach kids that I've been describing, they desperately wanted to implement those pause ed ideas.
Mm.
But frankly, these young people were not sitting still. They were
Yeah.
not listening. They were creating chaos sometimes in their schools. They were self-exiting classrooms when they didn't get their own way. And so a lot of teachers were starting to give up on the things we know can really benefit kids.
Yeah.
And thus, we realize, how can we position positive education in a more practical and positive way for teachers who are contending with a great deal of dysregulation in their classrooms?
Yeah.
And that's when we look to the lessons of trauma-informed practice
Uh-huh.
and begin to reposition and find commonalities between trauma-informed practice, positive education, and create a narrative of practice change for teachers that says, you absolutely can build self-regulation through co-regulatory strategies. That's
All right.
co-regulating someone when they feel heightened. We can give you relational strategies for the classroom. We can create rhythm in the classroom and a culture that is strong enough to create classroom belonging for kids that don't feel like they belong. And what teachers have found when they employ those strategies in a developmental way, that young people are building their capacities for learning that they hadn't had before, and they were beginning then to learn their strengths and learn how to develop the thinking-based strategies that a lot of positive education introduces to kids. And so we've found a great deal of success in that approach. And, you know, many teachers care about kids, but they're stuck in a deficit mindset of, well, what's wrong with this kid? And why is this kid not behaving? And this kid seems so hyperactive, and this kid just gives up so easily. But I know that Pause Ed asks us, what's right with this kid? When is this kid on task? What are the conditions that we can recreate when the kid feels successful? So that's a glimpse into our ways of thinking and moving.
I see. So I guess that early on you're talking about positive education always employs a series of evidence-based, evidence-informed strategies in the classroom setting. Can we give us some examples in terms of what are some of the classroom-based strategies that can help to increase the psychological capacities of the students who are struggling at school?
Yes. So that's a big question, and
Yes.
I've written a lot of research and stuff
Thank
around
you.
that. So I'll start at the beginning, just in this little glimpse here.
Sure.
Is often we work with kids, and I know that some of our listeners are working with kids who it feels like their stress response goes from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. That this child did not mean to flip a table or to say those words or to insult somebody else. But again, because their stress response is firing so quickly, that often their body betrays what their mind wanted them to do. And so taking our lead from our trauma-informed practice strategies, we really want to begin teaching young people about their own bodies, because chronic stress and trauma is helpfully understood as being stored in the body, and often it's not verbal. So the last thing these kids need are more lectures about good choices, because their bodies are trying to make the best choices they can to stay alive and to survive this difficult situation. And so a lot of the kids we work with, their own bodies are a mystery to themselves. Like, why did my body do that? Why am I catching up? Why is my heart rate racing? And so they don't feel a connection to their own body. And thus we want to begin to build insight for kids. So we want to, so my quick advice is, instead of giving kids choices, lectures about their choices and where they're going to go I instead want to flip the script to begin proactively teaching kids, this is what happens when you are uncertain, and this is the way your body responds. And we want you to begin noticing these changes in your body. And then we want you to proactively seek support. And we have a whole bunch of cute and helpful ways to help kids seek that support before they lose control of themselves or what they're doing. And so that intervention mindset has really assisted a lot of teachers, bringing it back to the body.
Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, is saying that instead of having some sort of intellectual reasoning with the kids who are almost like at the verge of bursting out or because of trying to regulate the high level of distress, it's important to let them understand what's happening in their body. So some sort of body scanning exercises, understanding sensory experiences, teaching them the practical skills to know, and you use the word regulate, or sometimes maybe to anchoring, and before it's so-called get out of control, and just teaching that really important skills of understanding the body experience can be an effective way to help the kids to regulate the high level of distress. Is that correct?
Very correct. And then I've got to add a very useful tip that I received years ago from Marty Seligman, that one of the most important resilience skills that we can teach our young people is to proactively seek support. And so we carry on that legacy at Berry Street with our partners around the world. And we realize so many young people who are struggling do not proactively seek support. They're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. And one of the reasons is when they tried to ask for help last year, that teacher or that adult in the school didn't help them in the way that was useful to them. So a lot of kids have stopped asking. They don't feel safety, and they don't feel a relationship that's strong enough with an adult in the school to have an adult in their corner and say, listen, I need a little help. Like, this feels unfair. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know how to do this learning thing, or these kids are making fun of me. And we work with so many kids who just feel like they have to take it into their own hands, and starts coming out in unproductive and maladaptive ways.
Yeah, it's almost coming to the point of survival mode. I need to survive, and I don't know who I can trust. And therefore, the only person I can trust so far is me. And therefore, as I said, taking a lot of things in their own hand. So just remind me of another, I guess, important principle of the trauma-informed practice, which is the whole building relationships, building the fundamental trust. Because only when the kids or when the young people are able to say, hey, I'm willing to take the risk to give it another go, to trust you, then potentially that is where the proactive seeking help and continue to help them develop the set of skills, resources, and the psychological capacities.
Well, you said the magic R word, which is, today I'll say the R word is relationship. And I'd like to challenge my educator friends who are listening that often teachers certainly have been told since we were in our qualification and degrees, you need to build a relationship with those kids. And we realize that in our work and research, that is both a helpful and unhelpful piece of advice, because a lot of teachers think, I am building a relationship with this kid. I know what this kid likes. I know what his preferences are. I know what his strengths are. Like, I'm doing relational stuff, but when I ask the kid to do something he doesn't know how to do, like double digit multiplication, if he doesn't know how to do that, he just gives up, or worse. And I thought we had a good relationship, but he just spins out. So does that mean I'm really bad at doing this relational stuff? And we realized a lot of teachers go home at night feeling really sad inside because they thought they had a relationship to hold kids in times of stress or learning uncertainty. And we realize that's not helpful. And so we want to adjust the word relationship with teachers to say, it's not simply about getting to know kids, because that's important, but that's obvious. To my audience out there, looking at Barbara Fredrickson's research on micro moments of emotional contagion and micro moments of relational connection, we really want to ensure teachers think relationships aren't this big thing. They're actually micro moments. Like, it's the way that a teacher lines kids up. It's the way that a teacher greets each kid each morning. It's the micro moments when a teacher corrects a kid or reminds a kid to get back on task or has to stop a kid from doing something. That's all micro moments. And so all of our relational strategies are really narrowing in on how we can support educators to address those micro moments in really relational ways and maintain that relationship when the kid feels unwavering or uncertainty when learning.
So when you talk about intentionally focusing on the micro moments, again, I'm not a teacher or educator. So I'm just thinking at the back of my mind, like it is exhausting. That doesn't mean that I have to be constantly aware of every single interaction that I have with 10 kids, 20 kids, 25 kids in the classroom.
Oh, it's not 25 kids for my high school teachers or my art teachers or phys ed teachers. Those teachers have 150 kids.
Oh,
They have
yes.
kids.
Yeah.
Because so again, that's when we say to the phys ed teacher who sees sometimes the phys ed teacher sees the whole school. We say that's why you have to use your time well, very mindfully, very focused, intentionally, because you have so many of these micro moments of so many kids. And if you're not aware of that kid at that moment, that kid creates a problem for himself and for you. And so it's that's why we want to help educators build these practices in predictable ways so they are as consistent as possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I understand I asked you a very big questions, and thank you for summarizing for me. And once again, I'm sure there's a lot of the resources that the teachers, educators who can tap into if they're interested in the trauma-informed positive education.
Oh, you know what? I have to say, Adimus, I have to take advantage of this. So wait, hold on. I did.
Okay.
So you said the word resources. I just have to say, I'm very proud of this. So this is my brand new book and co-authored with positive education researcher and author, Dr. Jacqueline Norrish.
Yes.
And the two of us have written this wonderful new book. It's not even available in Australia yet. It's landing on our shore.
But you got one? No, I'm just kidding.
But I have one. But it is available right now on Amazon and stuff and around the world. But in this book, we talk a lot about our work at Berry Street and the strategies we talked about today. So I encourage your listeners to check it out.
Absolutely. There you go for our listeners and viewers who are watching and listening. That itself is one tangible, practical resource that you can use and you can explore it. Thank you. Thank you. There's actually a good segue to my next questions, because earlier we were talking about how teachers can actually define the relationship rather than looking at this whole overarching kind of interactions, but also focusing on the micro moments. I'm just thinking that what are some of the self-care strategies actually for the teachers to minimize burnout, or better still, to help them flourish or thrive, especially despite working in a complex and demanding trauma-informed education systems?
Fantastic question, because that's what I spent years and years and years researching through my PhD. And I certainly want to acknowledge my supervisors, Professor Lee Waters and Associate Professor Helen Stokes. What we found in our research is that the journey toward well-being for teachers and students is a two-sided coin, and it is not a separate journey. So a lot of teachers really struggle on pathways to burnout when they don't have enough strategies to help manage student behavior. And so when they can't successfully manage student behavior, they drive home from their workplace, their schools, and think, what the heck am I doing? I'm doing my best, I'm building relationships, but still these kids aren't learning. And so what we realized is, yes, we certainly want to encourage for teacher well-being. The things we know have arisen through trauma-informed practice around be aware of your breath. Make sure you're getting enough oxygen so you can keep your brain in thinking brain when you encounter complex situations in your classrooms. We certainly want you to connect to trusted people in your life, proactively seeking support. There's a cycling theme through our talk today. You as an adult need to proactively seek support when you know that you are feeling the stressors non-verbally in your own body, and you are feeling that sense of compassion fatigue. And I'll define compassion fatigue as when you feel like your reserves of empathy and compassion and care are drained from you at the end of a long day. That happens to all of us in helping in educational professions when we don't have the feedback loops of compassion, satisfaction. And so we need to refuel that. And the best thing we found in our research is when teachers enact trauma-informed positive education and teach through those strategies, they have to be able to mirror those strategies in their own lives. So you can't tell kids to be self-regulated and then yell at them or raise your voice in an unhelpful way, because that's modeling dysregulation. And so it's a wonderful finding that we can now suggest to people that when teachers live into these practices and see trauma-informed positive education as a path of personal development and personal practice refinement for themselves, they turns out they report that they feel better in their job, that they're able to maintain their self-regulation, relational cohesion, and practice those well-being strategies that we love so much. So I like the idea that trauma-informed positive education is a bit of a dual purpose thing, that if teachers stay focused on these strategies, the benefits to both teachers and students can emerge for all involved.
Excellent. It sounds like for those who are thinking of embarking the trauma-informed positive educations, already embracing trauma-informed positive educations, this whole sense of, I may use the word authenticity, integrity, that is not just something that I teach and pass on, it's also something that actually practice and live on, as whether it's a form of lifestyle, or so that I can be the, as you said, positive role model for the students. Because whether you like it or not, there's always going to be power differences between the teacher and the kids, and they always look up to the teachers in whatever shapes and form. So sometimes the best, I guess, that teaching is the examples rather than the words itself. Walking the talk, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
I really love your framing of looking up to the teacher, because the teachers in my research, often when I ask them things like, what gives your work meaning? Why do you do what you do? What gives you well-being? The number one answer is usually, I do want to be a role model. I do want to role model adulthood. I want to be a great living example of what education can do for your life. And when I'm not conscious of my own behavior and the way that I'm modeling these strategies, I don't get to be the role model I want to be, and my well-being at work begins to decline. So yes, absolutely. What we found is working through these strategies strengthens your ability to be a role model, the person you want to be, thereby increasing the meaning that you derive from your work.
Thank you so much. And I'm afraid that that's all the time that we have for today, but I only have one last questions for you, which is like, what is one thing that you have been doing this week to look after your own well-being, Tom?
So that's an easy question for me, because being a New Yorker for a long, long time, of course, you can imagine living in New York, it's obviously everybody's crammed in and nobody has any space. Since I moved to Melbourne, I've had a garden, which is very nice. And I never in my entire adult life thought or considered myself to be a gardener, and just thought that that was way beyond my own capabilities. And so over the last couple of years, I've just put my head down, and whenever I need to increase my well-being, I look outside and think, I've got to pick that weed. I've got to make sure those flowers get the water they need. And so I definitely get to spend time with nature right outside my house.
That's good, and we know that there's ample evidence to also to inform and suggest that there's a close relationship between nature and enhancing our well-being as well. Yeah.
I got to ask you, Adimus, what are you doing this week for your well-being?
Well, yesterday I deliberately spent some time with my 11-year-old son playing card games, and one of his favorite card games is memory games. That means that 52 cards. And that's one of the worst, I'm in my mid-40s and try to compete with 11-year-old boy, and you would just flip on, yes, 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 yes. I'm just, where's the next card? Where's the spade? Where's the love? Where's the ace? But again, I just enjoy that intentional interactions with him. especially as mentioned to you earlier, as a family, we only moved to Melbourne last year, has been a lot of lockdown challenges for him. So I'm pretty much mindful of the importance of spending some uninterrupted time with him. So that's part of the well-being things that I've done yesterday, and we both had a good laugh. We enjoyed it. Obviously, he won the game as usual, but it's great just to be able to sit down and just, as I said, admire, adore him. I really adore my son, and that's what brings me joy and purpose and meaning as a dad. Yeah.
Well, you've just given a pretty cool definition of compassion satisfaction. So it's nice to see the feedback loop of well-being happening between you and your family.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I need to not ask like that for our listeners or viewers who are interested to find out more about your works or the Berry Street Educations. What is the best way for them to reach out to you or to contact you, Tom?
Super easy to find me. So I am easily found on Google Scholar.
Yeah.
And all my research can be retrieved that way. Also, if your listeners want to learn more about our work at Berry Street, just go on the website and look up Berry Street. Years and years and years ago, the office was literally on a street called Berry Street, but now we are all over Australia. So look up Berry Street Education Model, and it will be very simple to find our work. And I gotta say, as I'm trying to get into the headspace of promotion, the book is called Creating Trauma-Informed Strengths-Based Classrooms, and I encourage your readers or your listeners to check this out too.
Absolutely. And of course, for listeners or viewers who are based in Australia, I think that the website is berrystreet.org.au. That's right.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for watching. I'm Dimas from Strength Optimizers. We're here to bring out the best in you by optimizing your strengths. Have a fabulous day, everyone. And thanks again, Tom. See you later.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.